Hi friends, my name is Emily and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be sharing 4 mini book reviews with you. So the first thing that I finished in October was A Deadly Education by Naomi Novik. So this is Naomi Novik's latest book. It is the start of a new fantasy series, trilogy I have heard. So something that I really loved about this is the magic system. So in this world, magic works on energy, and so you can either build energy, mana, by doing laborious tasks. So our main character does sit-ups and push-ups, and she's constantly taking apart her blanket and crocheting it back together because the painstaking process of doing labor earns energy to do magic. The other alternative is the less reputable way of doing magic, which is sucking energy from other creatures. That's mal magic, I guess. Some of her peers are doing a little bit of both. Our main character, Galadriel, aka Elle, is pure mana. So she has this potential within her, this deep, dark power that very much wants to go evil. It wants to embrace the bad magic, but she wholeheartedly resists and does all of her spell work, earns all of her power through pure painstaking creating of energy, physically creating energy. The school system is kind of cool. There are 0 teachers. It is entirely magic run. The school will assign you an assignment and it's sort of an honor system, you have to do it and hand it in or you will be punished. It's bad. It's bad if you don't do it, and there's no human to beg or cry or ask an extension from. It is mechanical within the magic of the building. All of the kids are in this school, so it's like a tiered level school, and you start in the top level as first years and you're working your way down to your graduation years and escape from the building. And the reason this school was created is because young magical folk are bright and chewy candies to these bad monsters. Once you're an adult, once you're, I guess, 18 plus, you're like a wizened, leathery old magical being and they don't want to eat you anymore. The kids are put into the school sort of from puberty when this magical ability, this magical tastiness develops, and they ride out so many years in this school until they graduate. And graduation is like a Hunger Games style battle between the monsters, who are all waiting to get these tasty snacks before they graduate, and the students who are trying to escape. Post school, you want to get into an enclave, which is like a coven of witches and wizards to protect yourself, right? Strength in numbers. Children coming from these enclaves are naturally in a better position than just the random one-off hedge witch's daughter. I'm sharing all of the world building because the plot is fairly simple. So Elle is this outsider figure. Not that close friendships are really invited. Everything is very cutthroat, very tit for tat. People form alliances based on how they can use each other. They don't really form friendships, and Elle has not come from an enclave. She doesn't really have any built-in support system, and so she's very much an outsider. So it's an outsider navigating the adventure space. I loved this book so much. When I finished it, I wanted to turn around and read it again. I just wanted to start right back at the beginning. If you have seen this around the internet, you've seen the hype, I would definitely say that it is worth it for some. I think for a certain chunk of folks, it'll be worth it for the nostalgic wizard school feelings in sort of pushing that to its logical extreme. What happens when you leave children entirely unattended with magic? What if that magic allows you to suck lives from other beings to increase your own power? How do you, with no checks and balances? Because essentially, the Hogwarts teachers are fucking useless. This book just eliminates the adults entirely because they're not needed, right? They're not needed for the adventure. I think for certain folks, it will feel very nostalgic, but in a sort of perverse and gritty way. If you read The Magicians by Lev Grossman, I think this might speak to you as well. I found The Magicians a little bit off-putting. It was like almost too dark and gritty and depressing that I never continued with the series. But this, I think, strikes a nice balance between dark and gritty and like actual interest and investment in the character. I gave this 5 stars. I borrowed this from work, hence why it is missing the dust jacket. I want to reread it, but there's so many things that I have to read this month. The next book that I read was Disfigured on Fairy Tales, Disability, and Making Space by Amanda Leduc. Now, the reason that I picked this up is because I am a Toronto International Festival of Authors delegate this year. So this is normally an in-person event, but this year, I mean, it's kind of an upside to COVID, it's online. You can access all of these free author talks and events, and there are so many. There is a TIFA kids event towards the back half of the festival, and the reason that I read this is because Amanda Leduc will be speaking there on disability in fairy tales, and she's partnered up with somebody whose name I'm blanking on, like a complete asshole. I will try and remember to put it on the screen. And they are talking about disability and disfigurement in fairy tales and superhero narratives. And I am so excited. I have had this on my TBR for quite a while. This is in part more scholarly analysis of fairy tales and in part memoir because Leduc is disabled. It feels very much like making sense of her own life, so like that memoir biography piece through fairy tales. So like understanding how she's conceived of herself based on the fairy tale narratives that she's been fed and sort of subconsciously absorbed. I just went like this. Obviously it means absorbed. That she's sort of subconsciously absorbed these ideas about her body. I think the thing that stands out in particular is the analysis of The Little Mermaid, particularly Disney's Little Mermaid, who in the sea, she has this absolute freedom and mobility without legs. And then she trades her disfigurement to be able-bodied, to have legs, and to walk on land, and to marry the prince and to have her happy ending. So that I've never quite thought of mermaids as disabled or disfigured. As an able-bodied person, I never would have made that connection, that idea of Ariel and the trading the voice for legs, trading her tail for legs. It's something that comes up quite a few times throughout this, and it's the image that stands out because I think it's the one that never registered as a disability or disfigurement for myself. Obviously, I've heard of like Scar from The Lion King. He's reduced to his disfigurement, and like the link between villains and disfigurement and disability is quite apparent. But I've never thought of Ariel as like disabled or disfigured Disney princess that magically becomes able-bodied by the end of her narrative. It never would have even crossed into my mind, and so I'm thankful to this for allowing me to think about that narrative. I believe I gave this 4 to 5 stars. This was on my TBR, and I would definitely recommend checking it out if you have an interest in fairy tales. And also in memoir. I think so much of Leduc's personal history is tied up in this. There are little snippets that she shares of her doctor's notes throughout her diagnosis process from childhood and like her reacting to them. I loved this, and I can't wait to hear Leduc speak on this topic. I will leave a link to the Toronto International Festival of Authors down below. The next book that I read is In the Low, Low Woods by Carmen Maria Machado, Dani, and Tamra Bonvillain. Okay, so Carmen Maria Machado wrote In the Dream House and Her Body and Other Stories. So In the Dream House is memoir that plays with memoir form. It looks at abuse in a lesbian relationship, in a queer relationship, and it kind of fits in with horror literature as well, which is what Her Body and Other Parts wholeheartedly fits into. It's horror. Because I've read and loved both of her other works, when I saw that Joe Hill had partnered with DC for this like limited series this fall. So Joe Hill has arrived at DC curating his own cutting-edge horror comics pop-up. Hill House Comics will terrify readers with a smart, subversive, and scary lineup of 5 original limited series. Hill House Comics debuted with Basket Full of Heads, written by Hill and illustrated by Leo Max. The chills will continue in the following months with The Dollhouse Family, The Lolo Woods, Daphne Byrne, and Plunge, from the very biggest names in horror storytelling. Plus, every issue of each Hill House comic series will include the serialized backup story, Sea Dogs. And then on the website, which I will link below, is a sampler, so you can sort of get a taste of all of these subversive little comics. Okay, back to past Emily. So Elle and Octavia are two queer best friends, and they live in this town called Shudder to Think, Pennsylvania, that is a former mining town. Weird things happen to women, like they will lose chunks of time and just not remember what happened in that time. And there are these monstrous creatures in the woods. And so it's sort of this like slight step off from our world, but there's also this supernatural element to their world. Things really kick off when Elle and Octavia wake up at this movie theater. They can't remember the movie at all, but they get the feeling that something is wrong. And then when they go home, one of them, I can't remember which at this moment, realizes that their underwear is on inside out, and they are sure that they did not put their underwear on inside out, which means that at some point in that time that they've lost, that they've forgotten, somebody else took their clothes off. Like, there are these fleshless monsters in the woods, there's a witch, a lot of commentary, I think, on women's bodies and sexual violence, but then also the violence done to the land. I will say that I wish the color palette that is on the outside of this graphic novel was more on the inside. Like, I am a sucker for sort of these very stylized, I almost want to say one-note color palettes. Like, this in places, in certain like little vignettes that are in the same color palette, and like, you know that they're part of the same segment within the story because of that shared color story. When a graphic novel has a really distinct sort of surreal color palette, I'm here for it. Because I can see myself reading this over and over again. There's enough going on here in terms of what it has to say about body horror, women's bodies, sexual violence, and the environment, the violence that we are enacting on the environment, the parallels between the pillaging of the land and the pillaging of women's bodies. Like, there's so much here that I think it rewards the reread. There's only more that you can pull out, more connections that you can make on the reread. Where it loses points for me, and the reason that this is I believe I made this a 3-star on Goodreads, is I'm not a fan of like kind of sketchy realist illustrations. I wish that it had more of a visual style that I found appealing. Unpopular opinion, but like, when I'm looking for a graphic novel, I'm looking for something very specific for it to be a 5-star graphic novel for me. Other people might love it, other people might think it's gorgeous, it might speak to their tastes more than it does mine. I think the more weird and wacky humans look, especially in speculative fiction graphic novels, horror, sci-fi, fantasy, the bodies don't have to be real. They don't have to look real. This is a place to be more loose, to be more stylized. I hope that makes sense. So I gave the graphic novel 3 to 5 stars. I could definitely see myself reading it again. I would love to read it in a book club setting, because I think there are a lot of elements to tease out, and I think my enjoyment of it will increase. Like, I can see myself giving it a higher star the next time I read it. The last book that I'm going to talk about today is also for TIFA. Emily Urquhart, who wrote Beyond the Pale, which Jen Campbell mentioned like a million years ago on her YouTube channel. Emily Urquhart is a folklorist, and when her daughter was born with albinism, she went on this journey around the world collecting folk and fairy stories around albinism. And I have had that book on my shelf for the longest time, and it was never the right moment to pick up Beyond the Pale until TIFA. Emily Urquhart is one of those authors speaking. Now, she is specifically speaking about the age of creativity, art, memory, my father, and me. So I did prioritize her work that she will be talking about during the festival, but I have started Beyond the Pale, and I just have to say I love her writing. There's probably a specific, is it personal essay? Like, it's a personal essay, nonfiction. Clearly I don't do nonfiction really. I do like academic nonfiction writing. I don't do this sort of more personal reflective writing, but the way that she does this is so good. Like I'm learning and I am getting a glimpse into somebody else's life. Emily Urquhart's father, Tony Urquhart, is a very famous Canadian artist. I apparently live under a rock. Like, I am an artsy person. But in the same way that doing the Wild Sound Civilized podcast with Bailey has opened me up to classical music, reading this book sort of felt like somebody sort of opening the door and being like, hey go, like, here's why I think this picture of squiggly lines is masterful. I found myself sitting here with my phone open, Googling every artist, Googling every piece, because she would describe it and she would talk about the qualities that she sees in this work, because I believe she did her undergraduate degree in art history. As an art history student, somebody studying it from that academic perspective, she has ideas about this art, but then also like being the child of an artist, going to galleries, seeing somebody who this is their profession, this is their craft, this is their specialty, going to a gallery with them and I guess getting his perspective on it, right? So she's had all this time with her father. So the book really meditates on creative genius. So in youth, you have these artists who are innovating. They are pushing the boundaries. They are doing weird and wacky things and shaping the genre. And it seems like a lot of these young artists are that like in between shifting of the plates where they have this genius idea that births a new art style, births a new movement in art. Near the end of their careers, a lot of artists produce these masterpieces. It's like a final culminating project of a life's work, like a life's work of living, of experiencing, of emoting, of being human, a life's work of practicing your craft, a life's work of viewing art, of being critiqued on your art, of thinking about art. And so she was thinking a lot about that sort of spectrum, but then her father also has Alzheimer's, and there was an artist whose name I'm blanking on right now, and she talked about how at the end of his career he was becoming, what is the politically correct way of saying this? As his cognitive function declined further and further, he still kept painting. Like the lifelong muscle memory of picking up a brush, of working a canvas, that was there. The short term became less and less and less and less. And then finally at the end of his life, he had like tunnel vision, like whatever was in front of him was the thing that he would engage in. And so he would paint, but he would only pick like a few colors, and his assistants would rotate the canvas because he would only be like, he was very tunnel visioned on what he was doing. There was a lot of discussion around how Urquhart finds these works fascinating. It's an opportunity to see like this unique cognitive perspective, but the art world is basically like, yeah, he peaked. These last paintings, they exist. We have them, but they're not worth anything. They don't have any artistic merit. And Urquhart is sort of pushing back against that as she watches her own father's cognitive function begin to decline. I found this fascinating because it got me thinking about what is the difference between skilled abstract art and children's art. Like, why when children paint like the essence of humans in family portraits, you know, those like potato people with like a circle with arms and legs sticking out of it, why when a child depicts their family in this way is it like unskilled and adorable, but when somebody who's gone to art school for many years also paints potato stick people, it's like genre bending. Like, I spent a lot of time looking at abstract expression art, and it looks really fun to make. But what makes it art? This isn't at all in the book. she's mostly talking about like creativity. It got me thinking a lot about the what is art? Is it intention? I don't know. I'm deeply curious to hear Emily Urquhart speak on the age of creativity. So yeah, so those are the 4 things that I am talking about today. Let me know your thoughts on these in the comments down below. Thank you patrons for making videos like this possible. One of the patron perks right now is that we are rereading the Dark Tower series by Stephen King together. This month we are picking up The Drawing of Three, which is book 2 in the series, and we are going to be having a live show, a live stream discussion for it at the end of the month. So if you are interested in joining us in this book club discussion and supporting the channel, a link to the Patreon page is in the description box down below as well. And it's open to patrons at all tiers. So for as little as $1 a month, you can support the channel and participate in a fun book club. I hope you are all doing well. I hope you are staying safe, and I will see you soon. Bye.